Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Objective Viewers portion of the show. And I'm Yo Mauricio. This afternoon, I have a very special guest from Indianapolis, Indiana, just for this interview, and she is the author of this book, no other than Joyce Long. Welcome to our show, Joyce.
Thank you, Joe.
Yes, and Trinity. That's a very, very controversial topic to it. Since you didn't take any courses in theology, what did you pick theology? I mean Trinity.
Well, actually, some of my experiences made me understand that a lot of people don't understand the Trinity, and it's hard to understand. I don't
It's
know
very,
that
very hard to understand.
one God with three persons. Said that there's no really other religion anywhere that believes that way. And when I traveled to places like Cambodia and India and Kenya back a few years ago, I realized that we needed a simpler way to talk about the Trinity.
Okay, how do you simplify Trinity?
Well, for me, I just made it very experiential. I just divided it into three parts and talked about God and the Creator Father, and talked a lot about creation. Each of the first 5 chapters discusses science to begin with, and then it goes into a biblical understanding of God, the Father. And then we went to Israel in
Really?
2013. And so that kind of led to the second part on Jesus, because we actually drove around to Israel with our daughter.
Uh-huh.
She was there in grad school and learned a lot about, how he's viewed by the Palestinians, by the Jews. And I thought, okay, this would be that's when I decided to talk about the Trinity, because Jesus has a lot of misunderstandings about his life too.
Yeah.
And then the Holy Spirit was the most difficult part for me to write, because that's kind of it's hard to portray the Holy Spirit because he's invisible. He works within people. And so that was very
How
difficult.
do you convince people from Cambodia or India that there is an existence of the Holy Spirit? How do you?
Well, that's difficult to convince.
Because we can only talk about the Trinity, but the Holy Spirit, it's hard to. It's all in here, though.
It is. It's all in here. And it's how God, you go back to Genesis, and in Genesis, it talks about we are made in God's image, Genesis 1:27. And then Genesis 2:7, it says he breathed the breath of life in us. So if you think about the fact that God's been in us since the very beginning, and his Holy Spirit created us, then it doesn't become that difficult, because if you can kind of see that we're the only mammal in the image of God.
Yeah. Well, writing the book. What did you learn about God in writing the book?
Oh my. So much. I think you come to God kind of as a child, because you got to have that type of faith where you believe. And I remember growing up, and my granny was very instrumental in me becoming a Christian and believing in God, period. So but as you get older, you try to reason things out, you try to do it on your own. And ironically, Joe, I was working at a church in ministry in communications, and I felt so far away from God, even though I was doing his work.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get back to where I understood God in my heart, and I wanted to have a relationship with him. And so that's what I learned. I had created in my mind that God was my personal Santa Claus. and that's not who he is at all. He is not that at all. And so when I prayed, I asked for things all the time. I had a checklist and everything. And now I don't do that so much.
Yeah. Why?
Because I know he's He's got my best interest at heart, and he knows what I need more than I know what I need.
Well, going to India, Cambodia, and all those Asian countries that you visited, uh, how do you relate the Bible? What excerpt do you use?
Well, you know, people look at your life more than they look at a book, and I wrote this primarily so those that I could explain it to people better, so they could have a starting point. And we have a daughter-in-law that grew up in India and Iran, and so really the beginning of this book started with conversations with her, and the Holy Spirit will direct you to use the kinds of verses and passages that you need to use. It's not a one size fits all, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. What make you write this book?
I needed to get it out of my head. To be honest, Joe, I just needed to put it on paper. I think that's one thing that makes writers different than the rest of the people is because we've got things floating around in our head that we need to put on paper and to sort them out. And I needed to sort it out for myself. This is really my journey,
Yeah.
and I'm just sharing it with people.
How could a Christian and a non-Christian benefit from your book?
Well, currently I am teaching this book in a small group through our church, which I hadn't planned on. My target audience for this was people who had walked away from the faith, or people like my daughter-in-law that didn't really understand Christianity. But what I'm finding is sometimes all of us need to get back to the basics. Trinity 101, if you will. Who is God? Who is Jesus? And who is the Holy Spirit? And
Going back to the Trinity.
yeah.
And well, it's how do you explain the Trinity from a non-Christian people?
Well, I actually brought a visual. Okay, there's 3 strands in my necklace, right?
Uh-huh.
And they look like they're 3 different strands, only they're kind of hard to get to lay. But if I take this necklace off, and this may get a little crazy, you'll find that it's one big strand.
Oh.
And I wouldn't wear it like this because it would be too
big.
wild,
Yeah.
too big. But each strand has its purpose in adorning this sweater. And so I kind of would
Makes
explain
sense.
it to people that don't know about the Trinity that it's very possible to have one God with 3 roles all wrapped into one. And that's what makes our God different.
Where can they purchase this book?
They can purchase it through Amazon, Crosslink Publishing. That's the publisher who did this book. And they can go to my website, joycelong.com.
Yes, and if you want to understand more about Christianity, and if you're a non-Christian, this is the book for you to simplify and explain the explanation of Trinity.
Yes.
This is the book for you. Go and buy this thing. It's not very expensive,
No.
and you will learn more about God. You will learn more about the Trinity. Those in Christianity, those are the hardest thing to explain. The Holy Trinity, and 3 person in one God. Just think.
Yeah.
Just think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
That's simplifying it a little bit more. Any last word for you?
Really, I just want to leave everybody with the idea that the God of the Bible is a God that wants a personal relationship with each and every one of us. And so after you read this book, that's my heart's prayer, is that you will develop that relationship, that you know He's real, that you know He works in our lives, and that He has our best interest at heart.
When you mentioned going to Israel, how did you feel? Did you feel anything when you visited the birth and death of Christ?
Yeah, it was totally I mean, it made it real to me. Seeing where he was buried or where he could have been buried. You know, a lot of this is speculation, where he was born. And chapters of the book, I try to describe that. I've got some pictures in the book that take you to those places. Yes, it was very enlightening. It kind of made the faith become reality.
Yes, yes. And again, you can all read the thing here in this book. Come on, readers. Come on, Asians. Come on, Filipinos. Buy this book and learn something about our religion. I'm a Christian, so I know what this is. Again, this is Joe Mauricio. Thank you very much for sharing your Sunday with us. And mabuhay.